Guess I should turn the car on, huh? Uh-huh. So there's this thing called self-consciousness. We've all felt it at least once or twice, right? You know, if you get embarrassed, your face turns red, you did something stupid, your barber chopped off too much hair on one side. All that stuff. But the thing about it is self-consciousness itself is the false. It's the false self. Because there's always a resonance, a feedback. There's a feedback resonance between your current experience and your so-called self, which the mind perceives, which is a conglomerate of past experiences. So if you're getting embarrassed, you're bouncing off your perception of how self ought to be. However you attained that, you're bouncing that off of your perception of how self actually is, which is also perceptive. So it's a perception of how it ought to be being bounced off a perception of how you think it is. And if they're too far apart, then your face turns red. I don't think animals blush. I don't think animals get embarrassed. There's kind of a technique for learning how to not be in this constant feedback resonance between the selves, between the current perceived self and the projected ideal selves. There's a way to reduce that. And the way is, of course, the same way everything else is achieved, and that's being present. You know, all I ever have to say in any of these videos is learn how to be present. Step 1, learn how to be present. Step 2, practice step 1, always. But if I just said that, then, you know, I would only have one video and, you know, it wouldn't be as fun. So instead, I get to say, be present in 1,000 billion different ways. Although that's really all I'm saying. Not saying anything new. Every single complication, every single thing anybody talks about, every idea, every concept is all centrally rooted in you either being present or projecting. And your whole life is different depending on if you're doing that in any given moment. In any given moment, if you're present, your life is 100% different than if you're projecting. That's just how it is. And if you're fully present, and it's hard for us to be fully present, it's difficult. But if you're really close to fully present, to where the projection is doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is acting as an invisible present moment enhancer or passive information system that informs the present moment, that is quiet, that doesn't come to life unless you need it. That's how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be working overtime while you're sitting here in your moment doing whatever you're doing, whether you're running down the street or you're talking to somebody, making a YouTube video, whichever it is that you're doing. If your projection system is too clunky, it's making all kinds of noise, you can't focus on what you're doing. And of course, then possibilities of self-consciousness and embarrassment and comparing current self versus ideal self, all these things can come up if the projection system is too loud. Or like if you compare it to Howard. Howard's broken. And it's not even that Howard necessarily is evil or anything like that, or he's bad or sinful. He's just broken. So for most of us, our projection systems are broken. They're not oiled. They're not kept up. And so therefore they're making all kinds of noise and they don't work very well. They're like a baby that's just throwing a tantrum all the time. They're supposed to be a very nearly silent background hum. Not you this, you that, you're not good enough, you're too good, you're too big, too tall, too skinny, too fat, too short. You're not in the right family, you don't have enough money, you have too much money. You don't have enough power, you're too scared. Blah 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 blah. So on and so forth into, and you know, when the thing is broken, it's not even that creative in its insults. When the selves are insulting each other, they're not very creative in the insults. So when you're sitting there listening to this debate, you know, you can't even enjoy the show because it's the same old shit. That's why if I have trolls, I hold them to a high standard. There is a clever way to deliver insults that isn't loaded with actual, what's that word? Acrimony or whatever. What's that word for when you're loading your comment with negative venom? Acrimonious remark, something like that. There's a way to deliver insults to where they're actually enjoyable for both parties. Chess players know about this. We do this all the time. It's like being sarcastic. That's another thing that Howard had issues with on that movie. The Infinity Chamber or whatever it was called. He didn't get sarcasm. Because sarcasm really is sarcasm is a way of telling lies. It's a way of bringing lies into your present experience. Because that's what sarcasm is. Sarcasm is, if you're learning a language, that's probably one of the hardest functions of the language to learn. Because it's about the feel behind the words rather than if you were to look each one up in the dictionary and then add those dictionary definitions together like you're doing math. It's different than that. But if you practice meditation enough, and you don't even have to practice meditation so much that you're sitting still on your mat with your little statue of Buddha the whole time of your life. All of your life, you're sitting there on your mat with your statue of Buddha. You don't have to do that. You can even just meditate 30 minutes a day, an hour a day. But the goal is that you you discover what the present actually is. And you don't know what it is until you find it, until you actually discover it, because words can't describe it. Words are a part of it. All the physical stuff and movements are part of it. It's just a matter of observing yourself in the present moment. You're just looking into it like with curiosity, and you see what you see. That's all it is. Very simple. And when you get practiced at this, then what it does is it frees you up to, in every present moment, however it manifests itself, you're free to alter or change course or swim in a different direction. Instead of having an entrained mind that forces you to do this because you've always done this, instead, you don't have to do just that. You can stop. You can pull the car over. You can roll your window down and ghost ride the whip. You know? You can do any one of those things at any moment, and you're not stuck. You're free to do whatever you can think of doing, or not do anything. But you're free. And the thing that you realize is that in the midst of all of this, there isn't an entity or a force that cares whether you choose or whether you don't choose, or whether you do an option or whether you dump the whole thing altogether, whether you start over. It doesn't. There's a vast, I want to say apathy, but that's entirely incorrect, because apathy is negatively loaded. This isn't positive or negative, or it's not any of those things. Any descriptor words don't apply to that, to the essence of the moment itself. Even neutral, like any descriptor, any adjective that you try to apply to what you feel when you discover what the present is failing. It doesn't work. Because what you're doing really is you are coming back from that oscillation between the perceived current self and the perceived goal selves, because it's always this oscillation here. Another version of the carrot. You're coming back from that. You're coming back from that kind of hallucination, and it's like they oscillate closer and closer and closer and closer and closer together until finally there isn't any more separate fragment selves arguing over how the central one ought to be. And it is just what it is. There isn't any more reflection, or there isn't any more this one wants it to be this way, this one doesn't want it to be that way. There's not any complainer forces. And it's not even like you get to the point where you're saying, oh, well, this is what happened after I figured it out, after I meditated for long enough. What happened is I finally accepted myself for what I am. My body is 170 pounds. I thought that was too much before. Now I've accepted it. Before, I didn't like all my freckles, but now I just accepted that that's a beautiful part of God's nature, and it's a very unique aspect of creation. And I didn't like that my toenails grew so fast. But then I realized that, some people's toenails grow faster than others. So, after all of this examination, I found out that I'm totally fine how I am. It's not even that. That's not even the place you arrive to. That's a place you can arrive to, and it's a better place than the fragment selves all judging them, or all judging each other. It's a better place than that, but that's still giving precedent to the words and their sort of energetic resonance, rather than staying in the moment. Because staying in the moment doesn't have any allegiance to any thought form. But like I said before, even if it doesn't have allegiance to any certain way or any certain belief, it can still go which way. It's ultimate freedom. Freedom to go this way, to go that way, to go no ways, to drop the whole thing, whichever. And you're just not loading, this choice is good, this choice is bad, this one's likely not to work out, this one's feeling exceptionally good today, so I'm gonna go with that one. Getting yourself to be present is tricky. It just is tricky. Especially being that the mind is invisible. It is invisible. And when you're in projection system, even if you're looking with your eyeballs and you're feeling out with your senses, it's very easy, like say if I'm driving, it's very easy for me to be driving and not even realize that I'm off in imagination. I just had no idea. And I can still drive totally fine. So it's not like there's some buzzer in my mind that says, hey, you better come back to the present moment because otherwise you're going to crash. It's subtle. That's why it requires practice. And there isn't a goal of meditation. The goal is not to reach some final place. This has never been like that. They might, people might have said the goal is to reach nirvana, or in the context of today's issues and discussions, they might say the goal is to free yourself from the tentacles of the machine. Or they might say the goal is to get together a bunch of the aware ones and create a new society. But as far as meditation and how I describe it to people, it's not there, you're not getting it so you achieve some goal. You're getting it to free yourself. And just the same as the moment itself doesn't give a shit what I do, it does, but it doesn't. It does in that there are natural repercussions for doing certain things, but in the overarching context, I'm free to do whatever. It's a feeling of absolute freedom. That's why I do it. I'm not even saying you have to do it for that feeling. I'm just saying if you have yourself in some sort of cage or box, or a multi-level, multi-layered cage within a box, within a jail cell, if you're in that or some form of that, practicing this will help you just see the way to go on ahead and step out if you want. And even if you find out that you can step out and you decide you'd rather stay in there, or you decide you'd rather pop 3 of the locks, but you want to stay in the, you know, the last 3, 4, 4th, and 5th level, you can do that. You can do whatever you want. You can make your cages tighter if you want. Anyway, yeah, just some thoughts on meditation and self-consciousness. All right, peace out, people.